Good evening, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome once again to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and it's Thursday night, so that means it's Thursday Night Trio, the TNT, with George Webb and Professor Hamamoto. And good evening, gentlemen. George, you are in a beautiful location. It looks like the weather is perfect. And Professor Hamamoto, with your permission, I think I'll ask George to tell us where he is and what he's been up to today.
Well, I know there's a little bit of wind, John, but this is beautiful Lake Erie here, and this is our desired charrette location. It's not, we don't have this yet, but we want to make this beautiful lighthouse here and this beautiful Lake Erie location a future charrette location, so we can bring in great authors like you, John, and like you, Dr. Hamamoto, to host people here when they want to see all their fans in the middle of the country. Maybe Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, maybe draw in a little people from Illinois, etc. And we have to keep you guys happy. We have to have you on water.
Yeah, how's the water, George? How's the water?
I don't think it's too bad. Let me go down there. Go down there and test it out here.
Professor Hamamoto, good evening. How are you tonight?
Good evening, John. I remember going water skiing on Lake Erie off to the side back in 1976. And there were all these submerged logs on the shore. So you're really taking your life in your hands. It's good to see you, George, outdoors. But I wonder, is it possible to make a side trip to Chi-Town, Chicago?
Sure. The world's your oyster. We have to go to the Hamamoto Library at Bowling Green, though, first. But after we get Shecky Green and you to do your Shecky stand-up routine, the world's our oyster.
All right, because our friend Chao Jian is the Consul General of the PRC. He's based in Chicago now.
That makes a lot of sense. So yes, definitely.
Absolutely. And by the way, I'd like to send a shout out to all the audience of McDuff Lives. All what is it up to now? 30 million, 40 million, or 100 million maybe?
Yeah, what you do is you put whatever number YouTube has, and you add 30 million.
Yeah, okay, that's the formula. And then there are also audience members from my correspondence from India and now Japan. Which, by the way, Japan, 60% of the people in Japan were against the Olympics being held at all.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
People don't realize how different things are in different parts of the world, and the world looks totally different from, I had the privilege of traveling around the world. Not for very long at a time, but enough to get a little bit of a taste of here and there. And every place has got its own perspective and its own way of making sense of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Japan certainly is entitled to a lot of respect for the fact that they have this ongoing culture that's not a Western culture. But it appears to be quite successful by most measures.
Yeah, well, I gave a talk last Tuesday on the anniversaries of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I mentioned that, including the current prime minister, Japan has had 7 Christian prime ministers, and the reason why I mentioned Nagasaki is because there's this person who lives right here in Davis. His name's David Dionisi. He is reinterpreting the attacks in an entirely radically different way. He's seeing that this was an attack by the Order of Death. We know them in the Skull and Bones, an attack on Catholicism in Japan, because Nagasaki has been the capital of Asian Catholicism for about 400 years. And that was the concentration of, in fact, the hypocenter of the bomb was right overhead of the main Roman Catholic Church there. So we're looking at history, and this is George Webb's specialty, just a radically revisioning of the historiography. And same with John O'Loughlin. I mean, if anything good that came out of the feminist movement of the '60s, it's the saying, "The personal is political." And John, you went through the personal family history going back generations, but focused on your father. And the personal did become political. It just blossomed into this larger intersection of the larger currents of world history, and that's really it's gratifying to you, I know, but as on an intellectual as well as an emotional level, it's incredible to see.
I got a beautiful vision as you were saying that, Professor, as you have a good way, quite a way with words, and I was seeing the great water out there, the lake, and I had a picture of my father swimming in the lake, and the metaphor was that my father is swimming through time and through history with us, and that he's kind of with us, and I don't know, like a friendly guardian, he's there, and I really get that kind of of a groove. I don't know if that's a silly word for it, but I can believe, I can get into this idea that he really is. George, you've said similar things.
Yeah, I've always felt like McDuff has been on my shoulder, especially when I'm covering that time period. But even after that, McDuff is a character that is kind of inspirational to have courage, to do the right thing, even though you think you might end up paying for it big time, and also be smart, be you know the Dr. Hamamoto kind of guy where you're taking in all these different inputs and you're constantly reprocessing and constantly keeping your balance. Yeah, I guess that would be sort of like enrichment, information enrichment, always. And so it's kind of I get to live in a world between the two, and writing books, historical books, and writing current. I get to kind of move like a Mobius strip in between the two. And I always go back, though, to McDuff for inspiration, for courage, for how do I get over the next hurdle. And that's what he means to me. That's obviously Dr. Hamamoto with this coronavirus thing is huge with his work with servitors, because servitors is just this in-depth insight into China with this whole Wuhan thing. And your dad had he's on the Nashville looking up the Yangtze as well. So there's a lot your dad informs about this current crisis too. So those are my two takeaways right there. You take your inputs, you take your mentors, and you try to take them with you in your challenges, I guess.
Well, I received just today the recent article by the great Yoichi Shimatsu, and I haven't seen any articles from him for a number of weeks. And he addresses specifically the Tokyo Olympics going on here. And I wanted George Webb to comment, since he is an elite athlete and he knows what competition is like at that highest rarefied level. Whereas I only made it to Pop Warner and Little League, and I hardly got any PT. That stands for playing time. So what do you make of all these fails of American athletes, George?
Well, it's very reminiscent of the 40th place finish. It's not going to be as bad as the military games, the Wuhan military games. 40th is way down there. And a lot of diplomats are now coming in. The Philippine diplomat, Otto Paglin Awan, is saying the same things I was saying 18 months ago. So I'm getting some nice corroboration right now. But I don't think it's going to be 40th place. But I think this Olympics so far, in my opinion, has been characterized by a lot of drama over third place finishes. The only one bright spot, I think there's two. There's the 17-year-old girl from Alaska and all the kids going crazy when she wins. And then the dress A kid, the swimmer guy, who seems to have that Mark Spitz kind of panache. But other than that, it seems to be a bunch of whiners, kind of. And I don't know. That's just how I've seen the game so far. It's way too much drama, not near enough. No, I'm not an elite athlete. I never was. I got as far as I could with what I had. You know, the plow horse went as far as he could with the thoroughbreds, but you know, we have the best athletes in the world. We should probably be doing better than we are. I guess that's my feeling.
John, do you think skateboarding should be an Olympic sport?
Well, I'm actually fascinated with the women's knee slide, where they come running up. You know, it's like they're going to do the triple jump, but instead of doing the triple jump, they get down on their knees and slide forward like they were on a slippery floor. And this is a major new sport. So I was you know, when I catch a little bit of glimpse of part of it. I saw some of the swimming, which was very impressive. The only thing was, I just wish that those announcers would stop doing all these emotional stories, trying to turn every single stroke of the swimmer has got to have an emotional meaning. and I just can't stand it. I can't stay in the room very long. My wife likes to watch them, but you know, this is a sideshow.
Mm-hmm. Well, the reason I brought up Yoichi Shimatsu, he claims that in the specific case of Simone Biles, but some other athletes as well, he's claiming that some of the fallout, the radiation from Fukushima, is affecting them neurologically. It's affecting their performance. And it's not just the Americans, it's other teams as well. All these different favored athletes are seeming to be like, you know, they're doing really well on the curve, and then all of a sudden they crash on their bicycle, you know, just all of a sudden. Eye to hand coordination, frontal lobe, you know, the neurological, the neuroscience is telling us that they're being assaulted in some fashion. Anyway, it might be speculative at this time, but it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this biological experiment.
George, what do you?
Well, I mean, Wuhan, the military games in 2019 is sort of the prelim for this. Was the largest event ever in Chinese history because of the closed nature of their society. The Western world never went there before, and we had the same sort of thing happen in Wuhan at the super spreader event. So, is this a baby super spreader? Are they going to use this as a kind of a way of reintroducing Delta, or creating a fear mongering around Delta, the Delta variant, and close down the Olympics before it's all said and done? I wouldn't put it past them. I think there is. I think these games have been used geopolitically many times before to sell the idea of terrorism or whatever. And I remember '72 in Munich very well, and so I wouldn't be surprised by some 9/11 type false flag before this thing's over. Yoichi's pretty smart about this stuff, and he's got some kind of inside track. Yoichi always seems to be about a week ahead of the big drop, so I have a lot of respect for him.
It's hard to imagine, though, that just flying in for some games and being there for a couple of weeks, and you would be, you know, dramatically affected while the entire population of Tokyo is still going about its business as acting as normal. I find that a little hard to explain.
There currently is some breakouts in the different neighborhoods of Tokyo. I think there is something of a lockdown occurring in Tokyo right now. I know it's a gigantic city with, you know, 30 million people or something like that. But I think in certain neighborhoods, there is this kind of regenerative breakout.
This is a person by the name of Colonel Boris T. Pash. P-S-H. P-A-S-H.
I know him.
Oh, you do? Okay, John?
Yeah. George, do you? Okay, well, go ahead. I'm familiar with who he is, and he's a bad dude.
He's a White Russian.
Yeah.
and he was part of an assassination project called, this project that engaged in character assassination on one end. That includes the great J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was red baited partially through Colonel Boris Pasha's doings, the PSYOP, and at the other extreme, just outright assassination. And this was to clean up dissenting scientists, journalists, reporters, anybody that wasn't on board with the new regime that was of biowarfare that was rung in by the attack on Nagasaki. This is an interesting character that needs to be looked into, and the only person that has done so is a British historian by the name of David Irving. And he even spent time in prison because, as you know, Britain has really restrictive libel laws. But he's written several volumes on World War II. They're excellent. He's one of the best historians out there. He devotes an entire chapter 10, to Colonel Boris, not just him, but he figures largely in this chapter, Colonel Boris Pash, and this group called ALSOS. And it's very much tied in with George's reportage and the backstory that you've been supplying us on the whole Manhattan Project, right?
Now I know what you're talking. I have a reference point when you say ALSOS. ALSOS is the group that goes in military intelligence that interviews all the paperclip Nazis and so forth. And this is in the different books about paperclip Nazis. And yeah, this is an interesting time because this is the time of deal making at the end of the World War II. Who's going to go to America? Who's going to go to Russia? That sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, let me add just a little bit from my own studies. Boris Pash, was a White Russian. He was also kind of a heavy for the OSS, and like you said, he was a bad dude, but I think he was also in charge of or connected to security of the Manhattan Project, which puts him in an amazing position. But so he was the head of the ALSOS mission. The ALSOS mission was sent to Germany immediately at the end of the war to sweep up all the remaining scientists and experts and to grab all the scientific equipment they could, especially looking for anything having to do with the wonder weapons and the nuclear program. And so that was his gig. He went there and grabbed paperclip type people and their equipment, and then he becomes he comes to America and is like this chief of security, if I recall, for the entire Manhattan Project. He worked under Leslie Groves. So then he's also named as part of the Health Alteration Committee of the CIA. So when you have a Richard M. Bissell Jr., a Boris Pash, and I can't remember what the third or fourth ones were, but just the real killers. He is definitely. And I'm so glad you brought up what you know, because I didn't know what you just said. You explained a lot, Professor, about his role in getting rid of non-conforming scientists, and I hadn't run into that. I do also have to make a footnote or a caveat about David Irving, is that a lot of people have voiced vehement objections to his denial of the Holocaust. And I have to join in that. I do not accept the idea that the Holocaust was not didn't happen, and he has absolutely said that. So I can't let that go without making my own position clear. Other than that, I'm sure he's done some amazing work. It's amazing how people change over time. It makes me think of Webster Tarpley, who did some incredible work. That he's one of the best people to learn about the Venetian connection and the Amsterdam connection, and going all the way back to Diocletian. And I mean, he is great. but boy, by the time of the last election, he was really kind of going off in directions that I just thought, oh, I can't follow this guy anymore. But it's funny how people change. But excuse me for having to make that. But I think it's a great time to for everybody to open the books on Boris Pashin, because he may very well be involved in my dad's story.
I suspect he might have been, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to reintroduce his name. I'm sure you have come across it in many other contexts. But speaking of Webster Tarpley and him going back to even to the Renaissance period, both John, you talked about the Tennessee KKK and the Templars, and George, recently I've heard the phrase Knights of Malta creep into some of your analysis, and it looks like you're leaning towards an understanding of the importance of the Maltese diaspora in what we're seeing today in the Great Reset. So let me just share with you a find that I came across the other day that brings all these elements together, I think. But you were at the Carlisle, Pennsylvania town, and you were talking about the Carlisle School for Indians, right? Well, as it turns out, this book, actually, I think it's 400 pages, something like that. 400 pages that's taken from the shelves of the Harvard, back then it was college, Harvard College University, that was published in 1890. And the title of that book, which is now Googleized, is The History of the Knights Templar of the State of Pennsylvania. And one of their main encampment areas was, guess where? Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And I don't think that's accidental there. And moreover, this document here is a part of the official U.S. military protocols. It's been read into the congressional record. So the Knights Templar, from what I can tell, are consistent with American military history. And this helps to explain why there's such great coordination between the NATO caliphate and all the different intelligence agencies around the world, including MI6, OSS, CIA, and whatnot, because this is an ancient institutional arrangement that we're seeing in the early part of the 21st century. We just thought this was a movie by John Borman or some sort of sword and fantasy film that we've been watching, while growing up. Whereas this is really our political reality.
Yeah, I don't know how you could. Well, I mean, I went to Carlisle and the Army War College there. That it's built on the old Carlisle barracks and literally built on the old Hessian barracks. And I could just see von Steuben out there saying, "Well, guys, didn't go well for us here, but you guys are going to run the barracks. We're going to put all the war secrets over here, and don't worry, we'll still be brokering war secrets until the Civil War that we'll trigger in about 100 years. So just sit tight, guys." And that's exactly what happened. And 100 years later, and you look at all the Civil War generals. I'm, not an in-depth student of it, but they were all Masons, and none of them died. It was always some guy who just got off the boat from Ireland, that got sent to the front line at, Fredericksburg or whatever. It was the Masons were always seemed to be above it all and moving the chess pieces in. That Lee goes all the way to Carlisle a couple of days before Gettysburg. I don't know if that was to get marching orders or what, but and here's the Hessian barracks that Washington gives 900 Hessians their reprieve there in Carlisle, and it becomes the head of the U.S. War College. There's something going on there. I don't know. It's odd. I'll just say that. I spent a lot of time in the town. It's where the first American president ever organized an army against his own people, which is George Washington in the Whiskey Rebellion. And they mustered in Carlisle. Just saying. Jim Thorpe made Carlisle famous in the Indian Industrial School. They played Army against Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower not too far from there is the Eisenhower Institute, where Butina was doing tabletop exercises for wargaming, for nuclear, wargaming for bioweapons. And then another half an hour, you're in Frederick, Maryland, where all the bioweapons are. It's just all too close for comfort for me. All too close for comfort.
I agree with you, George, and that's an awful lot of great historical references. I enjoy very much your ability to snatch all these things and put them together. We all try to do this with our studies. I love that part of Pennsylvania. It's beautiful, rolling hills and just gorgeous. That's the area where an opera company is that I did a bit of singing with. So I've sang in Carlisle and a whole lot of those little towns, little cities in central and southern Pennsylvania. A lot of good people there too.
And George, I was just
It used to be the potato chip country, where they made all the potato chips in the world were made right in those little towns.
Laura Scudder's. Remember that brand? No? Lay's?
No, I don't remember. Of course, Lay's, yeah.
George, I was just revisiting this book, Rock Island Virus, which is no longer available. Now it's it's a collector's item, I guess. But, and this is in reference to John's reference to Webster Tarpley. I don't know if Webster Tarpley was associated with the John Birch Society, but some of that early John Birch Society literature that I've read over the past 10, 15 years, because I grew up being taught that this is something you wanted to stay away from, right? But in reading some of the early literature, a lot of it made sense in terms of government overreach and the concentration of state power. But then, George, in the page 11 here, the early part of this book here, you talk about how Task Force, Jenny Moore, she connected the John Birch Society in tandem with Rahm Emanuel, the John Birch Society and the Mossad. And then at the time, you didn't really accept that connection. What's your take on it now? And could you unpack what she was trying to communicate?
I'm still not there, but she called it the Knights of Pythagoras, or no, it wasn't Knights, it was the Knights of, began with a P and there was a Y in there.
Pythias.
Yep. Pythias, was that it?
I think so.
But Pythias, Knights of Pythias.
Pythias, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that there was this ultra-right crew. There it is, Knights of Pythias. There was this ultra-right crew, these John Birchers, that sort of have, I don't know, can't remember the radio host out of Milwaukee, but he's ultra-right. And, just the sort of the NRA hardcore, nuke 'em kind of thing. First Twitch impulses to nuke 'em. Anyway, they had made some sort of, here's what Jenny believed, they had made some sort of arrangement with the Mossad and also the gangsters, the Italian gangs and so forth. This would be a kind of a, what do you call it, a common ground, a neutral ground where they could have meetings and so forth and, kind of make sure they're coordinated so that, the Bronfman, whiskey and drugs that are coming across Lake Erie from Canada would have corresponding amount of weapons to, make a balance of trade, or a corresponding amount of American secrets going across Lake Erie or Lake Ontario in the other direction, or Lake Michigan in this case. And so Rahm Emanuel, Anthony Weiner, etc., these kind of Mossad types in U.S. Congress, sort of used this as a meeting ground. And she actually proved to me that they had these meetings there with like Paul Ryan and whatnot, which, I had a hard time with, to be honest. I said, come on, Knights of Matthias. But she said, yeah, enemies or people who you would consider being on polar opposites, every once in a while, the secret societies need to get together and kind of coordinate, check signals. So again, I put it in the book. I think when somebody uses bioweapons, that's what would trigger a meeting of the Knights of Pythias, because it's such a heinous act that everyone has to kind of check there and prepare and have foreknowledge and forethought of what their reaction is going to be before it happens. Ghouta, Aleppo, wherever, Libya, Syria, Sudan, Yemen, wherever the bioweapons are going to be used, now the world. So maybe not. We had a very entertaining person, a very active person named Bernie Bridges, a woman who was very much behind Bernie Sanders, who would go to these different overpasses in Chicago and put up different slogans and on these big signs. And she actually took us up there and said I was a waitress at this nearby restaurant where all these mobsters and kind of Jewish mafia, Italian mafia, and these John Birchers would all meet. We went to the hotel. So, it's an eyewitness, and I tend to lean toward eyewitnesses versus, something I've read. So I'll just leave it at that. That's why I put it in the book. I don't know if people resonates with them or not, but I put it in there.
Well, it resonated with me because I grew up in Orange County, California in the 50s and 60s. And at that time, Orange County was synonymous with arch conservatism. You've mentioned John Schmitz, right? He used to teach at Santa Ana College, which is in the heart of Orange County. But I grew up in Anaheim specifically, which was, of course, the home to the great right-winger Walt Disney, right? He was really in tight with the city fathers of Anaheim. But back in the 20s, this is, we knew this growing up, and we'd kind of laugh about it because it was kind of distant to us, to our reality. But the KKK used to march down the main street in Anaheim, California. And there was and this is not to cast aspersions on Germans or German Americans, but there was a large contingent of hyper-nationalist German Americans that going back to the, I guess, Spanish colonial times had claimed that area as part of their turf. Then later on, of course, Orange County expanded, diversified as Los Angeles itself began to grow around it. So I'm very much acquainted, having grown up in this this particular social setting back in the immediate post-war period. And seeing the John Birchers too, right? The John Birch Society, they were big. They were big in Orange County in particular.
Well, and Schmitz, I mean, look, he was the guy who dangling the emails for Trump, dangling emails through Mike Flynn's son, dangling the emails through Peter Smith. He was this unknown guy who somehow had the Hillary emails, right? And he's the guy who wanted to put von Steuben on the flag of the DOD. He wanted to put von Steuben on the crest of the DOD. Von Steuben is this kind of murky character in the back, kind of making backdoor deals for Washington and Lafayette all through the Revolutionary War, kind of a fixer, if you will, sort of a Vatican fixer, only von Steuben's a, Germanic fixer. Yeah, I mean, all these areas you're talking about become, we talk about Fascist Island for Fashion Island, and
right,
these other things. They become the stomping grounds of the Eddie Jacobson type paperclip Nazis. Redondo Beach becomes TRW with all the space stuff, and here's Mayhew comes in and brings in all these guys and Howard uses money to bring in all these Nazis. So Orange County's always had this Nazi kind of thing, and you go just one county to the north with LA County, and you have the Adam Schiffs and the that sort of crew. It's almost like the Nazis of the death camps, have brought along their handmaidens that handed out soap at the death camps, and they've kind of come to this uneasy detente in Orange County and LA County. It just, and over again, this happens with Wisconsin and Chicago, and over there's the chalk and cheese kind of hard by each other, sidled into each other through some kind of agreement. some type of agreement that we know not of.
Mhm. Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And don't forget, good old San Diego County. They're contiguous. San Diego starting south, Orange, and then Los Angeles County. And then
And
moving up to Santa Barbara County.
well, there's Lompoc.
Vandenberg.
Yeah, Lompoc, a U.S. Missile
Lompoc.
Command, and now U.S. Space Command up there, and then down in San Diego. Gosh, we went through them all. Salk Institute and Scripps with all their virus vaccine game, and then SAIC, and then General Atomics with the drones, and then all the pipelines with Dewey Claridge. I mean, it is really a fascinating. And then George Bush with the pipeline through the middle of Compton. I mean, that was a fascinating trip for me. I was able to kind of get deeper with all these paper clippers that went there. I kind of thought of paper clippers as Washington, D.C., Fort Hunt Agreement, and then Fort Bliss, with the rocket guys, and then the American South. I didn't really have that in-depth knowledge of the Southwest, but they're there just as much as they are at Huntsville or in NASA Michaud down there with Oswald in Louisiana.
Alongside of Boris Posh, who's definitely earned a card, earned one of the cards in the deck of dark side guys. I'll offer you another name since you're speaking of the California Nazis. Otto von Bolschwing.
Yes.
Otto von Bolschwing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Was founded in 1969 a computer company called Trans International Computer Investment Corporation of San Francisco, which had contracts with the Defense Department. He was definitely one of those imports that you're talking about. Born in East Prussia, went to the University of London, joined the Nazi Party in April 1932, which is very, very early. And just one of the really inside Nazi guys that we don't hear about much, but there he ended up in California working for the Defense Department, building computers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is, to me, the Rand Corporation type dueling scar Prussian Nazi, which consider themselves above the lowly Munich Bavarian types. This was the elite guard of World War I that kind of came in and let Hitler have his way because of his popularity. But always they were, this is the Bormann guys and the Mueller, like you said, John. This is the Peter Strzok types that considered themselves a cut above the Bavarian Nazi.
Yeah, the Prussians.
The Junkers. These are the Junkers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It says he died in Carmichael, California. That's not very far from where I am.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in Sacramento County, Carmichael. It's on the outskirts of Sacramento.
Well,
and of course, this whole valley, the Central Valley, it's totally Freemasonic. Every small town that I've stopped at on the I-5 corridor to get gas or just to visit their little local historical association, there's just tons. It's just all Freemasonic regalia, including the town where Jerry Brown Jr. Has retired to. They have these halls that are open for community meetings, and you go around, and outside the meeting hall, you can go to the basement and you can see all the regalia. It's not on display, but it's there. And even in Davis, California, there are these little plaques around these brass plaques. It's in fact, when you go to these little towns, they have that little signage on the front with all the different clubs and civic organizations. So the point is that when the average person, including myself, says that, well, we have to appeal to our legislators and the Congress. I mean, who are the real legislators? They're not the ones that we've been taught. They're the hidden legislators, the dark hand, as you refer to them, that are really calling the shots. And that's what I think we need to focus on if we're going to be able to get out of this predicament that we're in. I mean, to put it lightly, predicament.
Well, there's definitely this person by the name of Pietro Bon Jovi, but his name really isn't Bon Jovi.
Yes.
That it begins with a B though and ends with an I. That he's the head of Italian intelligence now. He had the NATO space program. He had the spraying program. In South and Central America, as an Italian diplomat, he was the nuncio, the papal religious diplomat for the Pope, to Jordan in the time of Libyan bioweapons being moved there, and then also the nuncio to Iraq in the time of bioweapons being used there. So he really has quite a colorful bioweapons history. And he does have this kind of religiosity that very much smacks of, hey, once you're nuncio to the Pope, for 6 or 7 different countries, that's pretty darn close to a Knight of Malta. Remember, it is the religious and military order of the Pope. So I think they take themselves rather seriously in this. And what's really bad about that is they see causing a cataclysmic thing like COVID as God's will. As long as they have some kind of papal sprinkle, they're pretty much okay. It's the word of God. So that's what scares me about these people.
Well, George, I followed up on your lead earlier about Bon Jovi, who became the minister in Italy. So on a hunch, I went to the classic novel by Stendhal, The Charterhouse of Parma. And guess what family name pops up in there? And it's a papal family. It's related to Pope Leo, who was a Farnese. That family, that bloodline yielded about 2 or 3 popes. And it's also rumored, and by the way, California is owned quite a bit by the House of Castro. And as you know, Castro, Spain and Italy, they were all of one at a certain point, which includes Fidel Castro and includes Justin Trudeau, as it's rumored. But the entity that Bon Jovi is most related to, so far as the bloodline's concerned, is the Carthusians. And I looked it up. There's a whole list all over the world, including the Americas and Asia, of Carthusian monasteries. Now, that's not a name that's come up very often, has it?
No, I actually went to some monasteries which I had heard rumors of bioweapon fermentation and that were more there's the 3 different orders of monasteries. I'm just losing those. Capuchin wasn't it, and then the other 2. But I do think that these monasteries, these religious covers, do make great, hiding places, safe houses for people that are in these dark arts and in these dark weapons. The Carthusians I hadn't heard of before, but again, that's where I would hide this stuff.
Their monasteries are known as charter houses, as in Charterhouse of Parma, Chartreuse, Le Grand Chartreuse, which goes back to the 11th century. So we are fighting. It is a clash of civilizations, but it goes back in time a lot longer than at least that I recognized.
Again, it's like one of these things where if somebody believes there's something and that's what motivates them to do something horrible, it doesn't really matter whether or not we believe that's true or not. What matters is that person believe it. Do they really think that they have the bioweapons at NATO and they think that somehow they are the religious order of the Pope, and the Pope told them to spray, and they needed to clear a pipeline corridor for the Pope, or they needed to clear a vaccine monopoly for the Pope, like Moderna. Okay, well, I'm just following papal orders at that point. I think that there are people that actually will let that kind of rationalization help them through what's happening right now. It doesn't matter how much world disruption it causes. I think Fauci is very much like that. And so I worry about that when these people are in power.
Well, if their theology is rooted in apocalypse, right, which seems to be what you're implying, we could be seeing a global Jonestown situation here. this is their core belief system, or the Heaven's Gate. I mean, we've seen, or Om Shinrikyo, we've seen any number of cults leading up to this moment now. They seem to be almost like tests for the larger global occultic apocalyptic cleansing, if you will, in their mind. Because I think that's what they see it. They see it as a purification ritual.
I would say it's a preening. It's sort of like a culling. Apocalypse, I'm not quite there yet, but I don't know. Who knows what Delta is going to bring? Who knows what Lambda is going to bring? Who knows what Omicron and Pi and all the other Greek alphabet letters are going to bring? We don't know what they have planned. So we have to look at this. We have to take this seriously. It's sort of like, a 15-year-old with a machine gun. I mean, it's a 15-year-old, but it has a machine gun, so you have to respect it and recognize it for what it is. And this is not just a machine gun. This is a world bioweapon. So spreadable pandemic. It's serious. It's serious business.
I would add a note that I think maybe has been not played as much as it should be, and that is the effect of these lockdowns around the world. I mean, the lockdowns that we've had here in this country have been excruciating, and they've definitely hurt our economy. But because we have been pumping money into it, people have been able to get by, and rent abatement and all this stuff. Nobody's really, on the whole, that bad off. But I saw a presentation by an American who lives in Thailand the other day, and he spoke in terms of, hey, if you've heard of people dying, in massive deaths in the third world, he said, well, it's true. He said people are dying in Thailand. He says that, but the reason that they're dying is because they're starving. They don't have anything to eat because they're locked down. And being locked down in a remote area or a third world country, so to speak, there's no safety net. There's no Marines coming around with fresh water. There's no food truck. There's nothing. And when I think of the millions and millions of people that are now being locked down in places like China and Vietnam and especially in the port cities where they're productive, we need those people to be producing goods. And here we have all these supply chain problems that are coming along. So I would just put in a word for focusing on the incredible effect of the lockdowns, and not so much the COVID. And it causes me to say, honestly, I don't understand people that are putting COVID ahead of the economy itself, because it's like you're sailing a ship and you've got to keep the ship going. I mean, the economy just you can't just stop the economy. You got to let it keep going. And if you stop it just because you've got some sick people on board, then you're going to lose the ship. I mean, that's what I see. We're making a very, very big mistake by totally gearing everything to a disease. We've got to make sure that we don't lose the ship.
Well, I am working for a company that had 10 tutors, all these brilliant Michigan PhDs who all had offered to be in-person tutors at this company called Liberty Learning Center. That's the other half of Neighborhood News. And COVID completely wiped that business out. And so they went from having a good business model to being $0. So this whole thing about me going there is to try to bring up the news side of the business, to have a baseline so that then we can relaunch, probably virtually, the learning business. But you know, I agree with you, John. That's just economics. Nobody died. You know, we kept the business, thank God. We saved it just in the nick of time. But I agree with you. Internationally, it's a much different story. There's a lot of people that with the supply chain stuff that just died. So yeah, I think you gotta like you say, push the boat forward before you bat down all the hatches. You don't want to be like left out in the middle of Lake Erie with no food and then like, okay, we're going to bat down all the hatches and start scrubbing everything. Well, you're going to die. You know, you got to get in there. You got to get back to port, and you got to keep driving forward with the economy. So I agree with you. It's been a horrible thing.
Brightly beams our Savior's mercy from his lighthouse evermore, but to us he leaves the keeping of the lights along the shore. That's a old hymn written about Lake Erie and the dangers of seafaring back in the day. Yeah, God looks after us, but we also have to look after each other. And we try to do that here at McDuff channel on Thursday nights, where we open up our thinking caps and share our thoughts. Professor Hamamoto, what you thinking?
Yeah, open up our caps for sure. I mean, I was just wondering, is there any other show out there that ranges from the Knights Templar to to the KKK to the Olympics? You know, I mean, that's a pretty broad scope of topics to be knit together, but somehow it all kind of articulates, doesn't it, together?
It always works together, and I think that's because we think a lot, we read a lot, and we listen to really you know, good analysis, and we have great audience. Our audience of researchers is just so incredible that we get this enriched uranium to start with. You know, we get the 45-50% enriched uranium, and we just have to get that little extra. So I enjoy our conversations so much, and they're always insightful. I look at it this way: why I listen to shows is insights. I don't listen to see Lake Erie or, you know, books or whatever. I listen for things that go, oh my God, that is something I remember reading about, but I didn't quite understand it, and that insight explains it. And that's what I think we deliver. I really do, with all of our research community, and when we all come together, we deliver the insights. And thank you to all the researchers that make it possible.
Indeed, thanks to all the researchers and all the people in the chat. We gain so much by sharing, and it's really a privilege to be part of it. One, I will also invite you all tomorrow night at 8 o'clock here on McDuff Lives. I'm going to have a special show with David Shaven, and we're going to dig deep into Mozart's magic flute and the Egyptian connection with the pyramids and all of the Masonic symbolism. We're going to open it up and see what makes it tick tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So thought you might want to join us for that. It'll be a lot of fun. David is an expert musician and certainly a scholar as to the Mozart and the times of Mozart and Beethoven. So we're going to have a lot of fun. I love Mozart. I love the magic flute, and so I know I'm going to enjoy it. And everybody, be sure and connect with Neighborhood News Hour and get George Webb's latest book autographed for yourself. They're all going to be rare. They're all going to be quite valuable one day. Professor Hamamoto, you started your collection, and I see you're going to be wrapping that in special paper and okay. All right, I don't put it on eBay yet, though. I think you let it ripen a little bit.
Well, I have two each, one to read and one collector.
There you go. Beautiful. That's fun. Well, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure. And thank you so much for allowing me to join you. I'm sorry I'm a little bit mobile tonight because we're looking at some places to live. But there you go. I appreciate you guys so much, and thank you for letting me be a part of it.
All right.
Thank you, John, for the invitation. And thank you, audience. You're great. You're wonderful. Gentlemen, good night.
Good night.
All right.